They thought today would be their victory lap, their grand unveiling, their polished celebration of power, money, and arrogance. 50 high-end cabins gleaming across the ridge like trophies the HOA mafia believed they'd stolen fair and square. But the morning didn't open with applause. It opened with panic. A crawling, rising, choking panic as a convoy of luxury SUVs and polished sedans jammed the Owens cutoff and came to a dead stop against a 12-foot steel gate I welded shut with my own 2 hands. Before we move forward, drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from right now, because this will be the HOA meltdown heard around the world. This road, my road, was the only way in or out of their entire 50-cabin development. And I stood on my porch with a mug of black coffee, watching the HOA president, Evelyn Draycott, clutch the steel bars like a trapped animal, screaming at the lineup of wealthy buyers that I was holding families hostage. That was the exact moment I knew every inch of this plan had worked. But that's not even the half of it. Across from her was Grant Mallory, the developer who swaggered into my life months ago with forged authority, fake enforcement, and the entitlement of a man who had never been told no. Now he stared at my welded gate like it was the door of his own coffin. Behind them, 50 buyers stepped out of their cars, outrage rising like heat waves off the asphalt. They all turned to the ridge where their new cabins waited, locked away behind a road they didn't own, never owned, and legally could never touch. "Open this gate!" Evelyn shrieked, rattling the bars as if the force of her tantrum could undo county-stamped law. Her voice cracked, her composure shattered, and her audience, those luxury-loving buyers she'd promised unrestricted access, was watching her implode. That's when everything blew apart. I took one slow step off my porch and walked toward them, coffee in hand, the morning quiet settling behind me like armor. A few neighbors peeked from their porches. A news van pulled up at the highway turnout, camera pointed straight at the chaos. Grant saw the camera and went pale. Someone from the crowd yelled, "Why's the road locked? Our contracts say we have access." Evelyn spun toward them, sweating through her makeup. "He is illegally blocking community infrastructure," she screamed. I laughed. A single, steady, low sound. Controlled dominance. "Community infrastructure?" I said as I reached the gate. "You mean my private road?" A ripple went through the buyers. Shock, confusion, fear. I pulled a thick, sealed envelope from under my arm. County seal. Certified stamp. The truth they never checked. "I'll make this simple," I said, raising the document so every camera could lock onto it. "This road belongs to the Owens Ranch. It always has. And your HOA queen here never purchased a right-of-way. Not a foot, not an inch." Gasps, murmurs, eyebrows raised. I saw one buyer, Rolex, starched collar, turn to Grant and demand, "Is he serious?" Grant looked like his throat had collapsed. Evelyn tried again, voice shrill and wobbling. "You can't do this. You are obstructing a multi-million-dollar community." I stepped closer so she could see the certainty in my eyes. "No," I said. "You obstructed yourselves the day you tried to bully a rancher without reading the property lines." I unrolled the 1949 survey map. Laminated, color-coded, undeniable. Cameras zoomed in, phones shot upward. The map was the weapon they never saw coming. "Red is my land," I said, tapping the page. "Blue is yours." I traced the border. 3 sides, federal forest, impassable, protected, illegal to build. Then I tapped the bottom edge. 4th side? That's my ranch, my fence line, my road, entirely on my deed. Silence swallowed everything. Even Evelyn stopped screaming. For one breath, one beat, 1 second where truth hit her skull with the force of a hammer. Then came the emotional collapse. Grant lunged at the bars, shouting that he'd bury me in court. A buyer yelled back, "You lied to us!" Another shoved his sales folder into Grant's chest. A woman shouted that she put her retirement into this property. A man in a tailored suit demanded refunds. Investors were recording everything. The camera crew caught every meltdown. I sipped my coffee. Calm. Controlled. Dangerous. Grant's foreman, one of the same goons who tried intimidating me months ago, stepped forward, pointing a shaky finger. "You can't do this, old man." I turned to him slowly. "You attempted trespassing violations on my property. You enforced fake compliance notices. You stood by while your boss threatened my wife. Tell me, why exactly should I do anything for you?" He stepped back, eyes wide, shoulders trembling. They all understood now. They weren't dealing with some pushover farmer. They were dealing with a man who waited, who watched, who documented everything, and who struck only when the trap was fully closed. My voice stayed quiet when I spoke again. "You poured millions into cabins you can't legally reach. You built a luxury prison, and now you're mad the warden won't open the gate." A man in the crowd whispered, "Oh my God, he really owns the only road." Another added, "They never checked the deed? Who runs an HOA like this?" The villain behavior upgraded instantly. Evelyn clawed at the bars, face twisted into a feral snarl. "You conniving snake!" she screamed. "You let us build all of it. You watched us." I nodded slowly. "Correct." Gasps, shockwaves, full public collapse. "Why?" she spat. "Why would you let us finish?" I leaned in. "Because you don't fight a storm by swinging fists. You fight it by letting it burn itself out." Camera crew leaned forward. The entire highway silent. "And now," I said, "you owe 50 buyers, 3 banks, and the entire county an explanation for why your development has no legal access." Evelyn's legs buckled. She grabbed Grant's shoulder to keep from falling. He jerked away. Their unity evaporated. Their power dissolved. Their empire shattered. Cliffhanger hits here. A sheriff's cruiser rolled up behind the last car in line. The crowd parted. The sheriff stepped out slowly, hand resting on his belt. "Morning, Luke," he said. "Got a situation here?" I held up the deed. "Just the truth catching up to the HOA," I said. Evelyn spun towards the sheriff. "Arrest him! He's blocking a community road." The sheriff raised an eyebrow. "Ma'am, that's his road, and it always has been." Her scream collapsed into a cracked whimper. The buyers looked ready to riot, and I smiled, because this was only the first domino, and they had no idea what was coming next. Before any of this chaos, before the HOA mafia tried to swallow my land whole, before the cabins rose like monuments to arrogance on the ridge, life on the Owens Ranch ran the same way it had for 4 generations, quiet, steady, and built on the kind of respect men like Grant Mallory never understood. The mornings belonged to the land. The sunlight would hit the top of Pineback Ridge first, then spill over the pastures, warming the tall grass and the old fence posts my grandfather hammered into the ground with his calloused hands. My coffee was always black. My dog Boone always snored at my feet. And the Owens Cutoff, that narrow dirt road carved by my great-granddad and his brothers with a shovel and a stubborn tractor, wound down to the highway like a boundary written into the earth itself. That road wasn't infrastructure. It wasn't a convenience. It was heritage. Every memory of my childhood ran across those packed ruts. I rode my bike down it pretending I was an Air Force pilot. I drove my first date down it with both hands shaking on the wheel. My father taught me how to drive cattle on that road. My mother taught me how to be patient on that road. But patience has limits. And the day Grant Mallory and HOA President Evelyn Draycott pulled up in their spotless black SUV, pretending they were royalty visiting a peasant, I knew those limits were about to be tested. Boone growled before I even saw them. He felt the trespass before the tires hit my gravel. When they stepped out, their disgust from my ranch was immediate. Evelyn held a clipboard like a scepter, pinching her nose at the sight of peeling porch paint and stacked firewood as if she were judging a crime scene. Grant adjusted his $1,000 jacket and scanned my land like he was deciding how quickly he could bulldoze it. Their arrogance smelled the same as every fake authority I'd dealt with during my years in service. People who think rules apply to everyone except them. I didn't stand. I didn't offer a handshake. Marines are trained to wait, to watch, to let the other person reveal their weakness without saying a word. "Mr. Owens," Evelyn announced, her voice a shrill performance of superiority. "We're here to finalize the access agreement for your road." She said finalize like there had been a beginning, like we were in negotiations, like I hadn't lived my whole life on this land. Grant pulled out a checkbook with a flourish, as if I should faint from gratitude. $5,000, he said, smiling like a salesman who preyed on retirees. "For your little dirt path." My grip tightened around my coffee cup. $5,000 for the only legal access to 50 luxury cabins. $5,000 for a road that determined the fate of an entire development. They thought they were buying a doormat. They didn't realize they were waking a man trained to end fights before they start. Julie stepped onto the porch behind me. Her presence was enough to keep my temper locked down. I looked at Grant, then at the check, then at Boone. "The road's not for sale," I said. Their faces shifted. The fake politeness evaporated. Grant's smile tightened until it cracked. Evelyn clicked her pen like a countdown to war. "You don't seem to understand," she snapped. "This project is a $50 million locomotive, and you," she waved a manicured hand at my ranch, "are a penny on the tracks." This was the escalation. The moment they traded persuasion for intimidation. And I felt the old military instincts settle in my bones, calm, cold, certain. "We will pave this road," she hissed. "We will rename it, and if you resist, we will have the county condemn your ranch under eminent domain." Then she looked at Boone. "And that dog? We'll have animal control remove it. We cannot allow livestock noises disturbing our future residents." That was the line. "Threaten my land if you dare. Threaten my dog and you declare war." But I didn't raise my voice. I didn't posture. I didn't give them anything real. I simply said, "I'll think on it." And that single line, that quiet refusal, derailed everything they thought they controlled. Because while they drove away, thinking they had intimidated me into compliance, I was already forming the counterstrike. One rooted not in emotion, but in structure, law, and the kind of patience men like them couldn't survive. The next morning I headed to the county records office. Not for a fight, for facts. Real power doesn't come from shouting. It comes from documents, maps, signatures, deeds, authority. And when old Martha slid the 1949 plat map across the counter, her hand steady with decades of record-keeping, I already felt the shift in the air. I spent hours studying the lines, matching parcels, checking borders, verifying titles. And then everything snapped into focus. The parcel they bought, the ridge where they built, the forest that boxed them in on 3 sides. And my land, the only southern boundary, my road, the only path, my deed, the only authority. They had never secured access. They built 50 cabins on landlocked property, all because they assumed they could bully me, threaten me, wear me down. But here's the quiet truth men like them never understand. A patient man is not a passive man. A patient man is a strategist. I returned home with copies of everything, certified, stamped, sealed, proof. Julie sat across from me at the kitchen table while I laid out the maps. Her fingers traced the boundary lines. "So they have nothing?" she whispered. "Nothing," I said. "Unless we give it to them." Her eyes lifted to mine, steady, fierce. "So, what's the plan?" I took a breath. Then the words flowed like a verdict. "We let them build." Her eyebrows rose. "We let them pour every dollar they have into cabins they can't reach. We let them brag. We let them market. We let them sell. We let them think they've won." I leaned forward. Boone nudged my boots as if he knew something big was shifting. "And then," I said, "we closed the gate." Julie smiled. A small, proud, dangerous smile. The kind a warrior's wife wears when she knows a battle is already decided. This wasn't just a plan. It was a power shift, a reclamation, a cold strategy forged from every trespass, every insult, every fake authority they wielded. And as the sound of their construction crews echoed across the ridge, saws screaming, hammers pounding, machinery grinding against the bones of the mountain, I knew one truth with absolute certainty. Their arrogance wasn't an obstacle. It was the weapon that would destroy them, and I was going to let them swing it until it snapped. The first sign that the HOA cult was shifting from arrogance to obsession came at dawn 3 weeks later. The saws on the ridge screamed before the sun was even up, ripping through the quiet like a violation of the land itself. Dust drifted down the slope in thick gray sheets, settling over our porch, our coffee mugs, even Boone's water bowl. Julie stood beside me, arms crossed tight against her chest, watching machines tear into the mountain like they owned it. They didn't ask. They didn't warn. They never do. The HOA wasn't just a board. It was a machine, a power-drunk hive that believed everyone else existed to obey. And at the center of it all was Evelyn Draycott, clipboard queen of the cult, drunk on procedure and fake enforcement. But the deeper power, the one pushing the money, pushing the schedule, pushing the pressure, was Grant Mallory, the developer who thought intimidation was a business skill. Their abuse didn't begin with letters. It began with presence, with intrusion, with a deliberate, escalating campaign of HOA stalking that transformed my quiet ranch into a pressure cooker they thought would finally force me to break. They underestimated how quiet men break. Because quiet men don't break, they redirect. The dust wasn't an accident, the blasting wasn't an accident, the noise wasn't an accident. They were trying to shake us, physically and psychologically. Every morning started with the scream of machinery. Every evening ended with the distant rumble of trucks hauling lumber up landlocked property they still pretended they had access to. And every night, Julie and I added another page to the binder of evidence. The binder grew thick enough to be its own weapon. Fake inspectors, false accusations, manufactured complaints, attempts at intimidation, and surveillance creep that escalated from drones to personnel. One Tuesday afternoon, while I was fixing a cracked water trough, a black SUV rolled slowly along my fence line. It didn't stop. It didn't wave. It just crawled, windows tinted, a camera lens glinting in the sunlight. Boone growled until his throat shook. When the SUV reached the far corner of the property, it circled back, slower this time. Stalking, measuring, testing. They didn't dare cross the fence, not yet. They wanted to make sure I saw them. Fake enforcement thrives on psychological warfare. That evening, as Julie and I sat on the porch, a drone buzzed low over the yard like a mechanical hornet. It dipped near Boone's head. Julie gasped. I didn't. I just walked into the shed, grabbed the hose, cranked the pressure up, and blasted the thing out of the air. It exploded into the dirt in a satisfying burst of sparks. "You think they'll send another?" Julie asked. "They'll send worse," I said. And I was right. The next morning, a man in a polo shirt with a fake county emblem knocked on the porch railing. Clipboard. Badge that wasn't real. HOA goon disguised as an authority. His smile was the smug kind, the kind that assumes compliance. "I'm here to inspect the barn," he announced. "Complaint filed, possible boundary violation." Julie didn't let him inside. I didn't speak. I just stood behind her, arms crossed. The kind of presence that makes liars uncomfortable. "I'll wait," he said. "You do that," Julie replied. He waited 2 hours before leaving. The camera at the gate caught his license plate. The binder got thicker. 2 days later, another inspector arrived, this one claiming to be federal. He waved a cheap badge and demanded access to check for illegal dumping. I told him to fetch his real credentials. He fled before I finished the sentence. Every attempt was a trespassing violation disguised as procedure. But here's the thing about power-drunk bullies. When intimidation doesn't work, they escalate. And escalate they did. Evelyn Draycott confronted me at the fence line next. She arrived in a spotless white Range Rover, stepped out like she was descending from a throne, and waved a color swatch in the air like a weapon. "Mr. Owens," she barked, "your barn must be repainted. That shade of red is disruptive. Summit Ridge aesthetics require calming earth tones. Sage, taupe, sand." I stared at her. Then at the barn. Then at the swatch. Julie watched from the porch, her expression unreadable. "It's a barn," I said. "Barn red." "It's an eyesore," she snapped. "Fix it or we will issue violations." She jabbed a finger toward my old tractor. "And move that rust heap. It ruins the view from Lot 4. I tightened a bolt on the fence and didn't look up. "That tractor runs better than most people's marriages," I said. "Lot 4 has bigger problems than scenery." Her face went redder than the barn she hated. "We are trying to raise property values," she shouted. "You are dragging us into the dirt." "Dirt is what I farm," I said, not looking at her. She stomped, actually stomped, her designer heel into the ground and stormed off. Another entry for the binder. But the ugliest escalation came when Grant brought muscle. That was when the HOA cult abandoned pretense and leaned into desperation. Construction was nearly finished. Money was running thin. Investors were asking questions. And still I refused to negotiate. They assumed pressure would break me. They assumed numbers would intimidate me. They assumed wrong. I was fixing a fence post by the main gate when Grant's SUV roared up the road. He wasn't alone. 2 foremen, broad-shouldered, gym-built intimidators, stepped out behind him. They positioned themselves like enforcers, like hired muscle, like wannabe cops trying to play authority on my land. Grant's face was flushed with rage. "This ends now," he shouted. "We have a right to access our property. We're surveying the road today." I stood still, calm, controlled. Boone growled low at my side. Grant stepped closer. Too close. 1 more inch and he'd cross the invisible line that separates conflict from violation. I didn't move. "Move," he demanded, "or we move you." Then he shoved me. Both palms, full force. The kind of shove a man gives when he's certain the world bends for him, but the world doesn't bend for him, and neither do I. Marine training rewired my reflexes a long time ago. My hand clamped his wrist before he realized he'd made the biggest mistake of his life. His momentum did the rest. In one pivot, gravity punished him. He slammed face first into the gravel. His shriek wasn't pain, it was shock. The foreman froze. 2 men, twice my size, paralyzed by 1 quiet man who didn't blink. I looked at them. "He put hands on me," I said, my voice low. "That was his choice. What you do next is yours." The fear in their eyes was new. The respect wasn't. Grant wheezed threats as he crawled back to his SUV. They peeled out, the dust cloud rising like a surrender flag. Julie and I added the footage to the binder. But the real shift wasn't the shove. It was the panic. Because after that day, their letters became frantic. Their inspectors became aggressive. Their surveillance became obsessive. The HOA cult wasn't just pushing a project, they were collapsing under the weight of their own arrogance. And the only thing more dangerous than arrogant people with power is arrogant people who realize their power is slipping away. The abuse wasn't random. It wasn't emotional. It was strategic. They wanted to break me. They wanted to force me to surrender access before anyone realized the truth. But every intimidation attempt, every fake enforcement tactic, every trespassing violation, they weren't weakening me. They were building the case I needed. What they didn't understand was simple. Power doesn't belong to the loudest. It belongs to the one who documents. And I had everything documented. The binder wasn't evidence. It was the coffin they were building for themselves. The hammering on the mountain got louder. The cabins rose, their budgets soared. And still, they hadn't uncovered the truth. Still, they hadn't looked at the deed. Still, they believed the road would eventually bend to their will. I almost felt sorry for them. Almost. Because while they were busy trying to break me, I was preparing the discovery that it would break their entire empire. The cliff was coming, and they were running toward it blind. The day I found the truth wasn't dramatic. It wasn't loud. It wasn't some thunderous revelation cracking the sky open. It began in a quiet basement that smelled like dust, ink, old leather, and the weight of every decision my family had ever made on this land. Julie watched me leave that morning with worry sitting behind her eyes, but she didn't say a word. She knew why I was going. She knew this wasn't about revenge yet. This was about certainty, about fact, about building the kind of proof that could crush a developer, an HOA cult, and every smug parasite orbiting their power. If they wanted war, I needed a weapon that couldn't miss. The courthouse basement wasn't used much anymore. Most folks trusted digital files, online plat maps, GIS overlays. But digital files make mistakes. Human hands don't. At least not the old ones who used ink and rulers instead of software. Martha, the oldest and sharpest woman in the records office, led me down the narrow stairs. The fluorescent bulb above us buzzed like a trapped hornet. "Which tract you looking for, Luke?" she asked, pushing open the archive door. "The Ridge parcel," I said. "The one Mallory bought." Her eyebrows raised, but she didn't pry. She just shuffled to the shelves like she knew exactly what I needed before I said it. "The new folks already scanned these," she muttered, as she pulled out a book the size of an anvil. "But scanning ain't reading. They see drawings. We see the truth." She slapped the book onto the table, dust rising in a soft gray cloud. I flipped it open and worked backward through the years. 1990s, 1970s, 1950s. None of it mattered until I reached the yellowing pages marked 1948. That was the year everything was born. My ranch boundary, the ridge line, the road carved by my grandfather's tractor, and the parcel Mallory bought for millions thinking it was a golden mountain. When I saw the original surveyor's name, I felt the kind of electric certainty you don't ignore. Silas Moore, a man notorious for two things, whiskey and accuracy. If Moore drew a line, it was law even God wouldn't contest. I spread the map flat, weighted the corners down with leather-bound ledgers, and leaned over it with the magnifying glass. The ridge stood bold and jagged in black ink. The forest surrounded it like a natural fortress. My land was clearly marked in thick strokes, bold and proud. And then I saw it. The road. The Owens cutoff. Clean. Precise. Running entirely through my land. Not touching theirs. Not bordering theirs. Not splitting between parcels. The only way in or out. My breath slowed. My heartbeat didn't. Because then the real truth revealed itself like a trap snapping shut around the necks of people who thought they were hunters. Their parcel, Summit Ridge, was landlocked. Not kind of, not almost. Completely. A blue island surrounded by national forest and one wall of private property. Mine. No easement existed. No right-of-way existed. No public access existed. They hadn't bought a development. They'd bought a prison. And I held the only key. I traced the line again with my fingertip, as if I needed to feel the ink to believe it. It was almost beautiful. They had poured millions into cabins, thousands into advertising, countless hours into stalking and harassing me, certain I'd fold. And all along, the mountain itself was laughing at them. They were building a kingdom with no door. The quiet basement suddenly felt sacred. Like my grandfather was standing behind me, arms crossed, nodding with that hard, satisfied smile he used when cattle at auctions went the way he predicted. I copied everything. Deeds, surveys, title history. I took certified copies with fresh county seals. Each document was heavier than the one before it. Not physically, spiritually, legally, strategically. They were ammunition. When I left the courthouse, the sun hit my face, and I swear the mountain ridge looked different, like it was waiting for what came next. Julie met me at the door when I got home. Her eyes searched mine. I didn't speak. I spread the documents across our kitchen table. Map beside deed beside plat beside the original 1948 survey. She stared at the lines. Her breath caught. "They don't have access," she whispered. "None," I said. "Not an inch." Her fear turned into something sharper, something older, something protective. "What now?" she asked. "Do we tell them?" "Not yet," I said. "We let them build." Julie blinked. She understood instantly. "You're going to let them walk into their own grave," she whispered. "They already have," I said. "They just don't know it yet." From that moment on, everything we did revolved around patience, documentation, quiet, controlled preparation. And from that moment on, everything they did, every violation, every trespass, every HOA mafia stunt, became fuel for the fire they didn't know was burning beneath them. The cabins rose quickly after that. 50 wooden shells perched on the ridge like a row of overpriced trophies. Trucks roared day and night. Gravel spit from their tires. Dust settled into the threads of our clothes, but something strange happened as the development neared completion. Their desperation grew. Desperation is loud, it's messy, it's predictable, and it makes even powerful people sloppy. Letters arrived weekly now, threatening legal action if I didn't cease obstruction. Obstruction of what? They never quite defined. Fake inspectors showed up again, but this time with more aggression, walking the fence line, taking photos, jotting notes like they were building a case against me. They were, of course, but while they tried to create fake authority, I was collecting the real kind. One afternoon, after a particularly intense blast shook the hills, I stood in the yard picking up pieces of dislodged shale when I saw something glint at the tree line. A camera, not a drone. A mounted trail cam, pointed not at wildlife but at my house. I walked toward it slowly, calm, predictable, controlled. The camera blinked, watching, recording, violating. I didn't touch it. I photographed it instead, documented it, added it to the binder. Surveillance creep is what HOA cults resort to when their first strategy fails. But the more they escalated, the calmer I became. Because while they were breaking laws, I was preparing to break their entire world. The moment Mallory realized something was wrong came exactly when I expected it would. When the cabins were nearly done, when the roads were smoothed, when the investors were scheduled for the grand opening tour. That's when he finally asked the question he should have asked before spending $20 million. Do we have legal access? I wasn't there to see the conversation, but I saw the aftermath. The SUV speeding down the ridge. The group of men marching the boundary lines. The frantic phone calls. The way the construction bosses kept glancing toward my gate like it had suddenly become a threat instead of an inconvenience. For the first time, they were looking. But it was too late. Even when the letters turned panicked, lengthy paragraphs full of legal jargon, they didn't dare ask me directly. Instead, they demanded clarification in formal terms. They requested meetings. They insisted access was historical. I ignored all of it. Julie read each letter in a dramatic voice like she was performing for a stage audience. It was the only way to make their nonsense tolerable. Then she punched holes in them and slid them into the binder. The binder was now 4 inches thick, heavy, intimidating, beautiful. Every entry a nail in their coffin. The breaking point arrived the day a new envelope showed up. This one hand-delivered, thick, cream-colored. A law firm logo embossed on the corner in silver. Julie opened it, read it. Her eyebrows shot up. She handed it to me. A lawsuit. They were officially requesting the court grant them an easement by necessity. As if necessity erased my deed. As if desperation rewrote history. As if the court existed to rescue developers from their own arrogance. I didn't get angry. I smiled. Because filing that lawsuit was the single worst mistake they could have made. It opened the door. It made everything public record. It forced them to show their hand. It gave me a legal platform to reveal the truth with the exact weight of the law behind me. And it was the final piece of proof I needed that they were fully committed to their own downfall. After I finished reading, Julie leaned on the counter beside me. "Is this bad for us?" she asked quietly. "It's perfect," I said. And I meant it. That evening, as the sun dipped below the ridge where the cabins stood like wooden monuments to stupidity, I walked the Owens cutoff alone. The gravel crunched under my boots. The trees whispered in the warm breeze. I stopped halfway down the road and looked up toward the ridge. 50 cabins. 0 access. Millions invested. Not one lawyer or surveyor who'd dared to check the oldest map in the courthouse. They thought they were predators. Builders. Visionaries. But they were children playing with matches in a room full of dynamite. I reached the steel gate post I'd installed months earlier, just a stub in the ground then, unnoticed, unimportant. Soon it would become the most important object in their lives. Mallory and Draycott believed they were squeezing me. In reality, they were walking willingly into a steel trap. And the paperwork sitting on my kitchen table was the trigger. I brushed my hand across the rough metal. "Soon," I muttered. Their abuse escalated because they thought pressure created power. But pressure only creates cracks. And the ridge above me was full of cracks. Financial, legal, structural, emotional. Their world was built on assumptions. Mine was built on truth. That was the difference. That was the advantage. That was the weapon. When I returned to the house, Julie had already boiled water for tea. She didn't look scared anymore, not even worried. She looked ready. "When do we spring it?" she asked. "When the world is watching," I said. And the world would watch, because their grand opening wasn't just a ceremony. It was the stage I needed. They were about to learn that the worst humiliation comes not from failure, but from failing publicly. And nothing destroys a bully faster than an audience. The discovery was complete. The proof was undeniable. But the real spectacle, the moment everything shattered, was still ahead. The ridge was quiet under the moonlight, calm, still, suspended in the final breath before a storm. And as I closed the door and locked it behind me, one truth settled deep in my bones. They were out of time. The morning of their grand opening began like a lie. Clear sky, crisp air, that kind of mountain calm that almost tricks you into thinking the world is gentle. I sat on the porch with a mug of black coffee, watching Julie braid her fingers around her own cup. Neither of us spoke. We didn't need to. The ridge hummed with activity even from miles away, engines, voices, music testing in the distance. It was the sound of a celebration built on a foundation of failure. And the best part was they didn't know yet. Not one of them had any idea the road they were depending on was already dead. Not one understood they were standing on land that was legally a cage. Not one grasped that their multi-million-dollar showpiece was about to collapse in front of every investor, every buyer, every reporter they'd invited to define their triumph. I took one slow sip of coffee, then stood. "It's time," I said. Julie nodded with a calmness that didn't come naturally. She had earned it through months of harassment, threats, and violations from the HOA cult that thought they ran the valley. She didn't ask a single question. She knew exactly what I was about to do. She also knew that once this started, there would be no going back. I walked down the porch steps and toward the Owens cutoff. The morning sunlight stretched long shadows across the dirt, painting the road in warm, golden streaks. Gus trotted beside me, tail swaying with that slow rhythm dogs get when they can sense something big is about to happen. The steel gate stood waiting, locked, unmoving, impossible. The sign, private road, no access to Summit Ridge Estates, hung centered, bold, unambiguous. I checked the chain, though I didn't need to. It wasn't going anywhere. I turned back toward the ridge and waited. I didn't have to wait long. At 10:03 a.m., the first vehicle rolled up to the highway's entrance, a polished Mercedes, then a BMW, then a Lexus, then a steady stream of blacked-out SUVs belonging to people who believed the dirt beneath their tires should treat them like royalty. They pushed forward until, one by one, they stalled into a line of confusion at the sight of the locked gate. Horns honked, doors slammed, voices rose. Some wandered forward, reading the sign like it was written in a foreign language. A few tried shaking the bars. The gate didn't move, and the longer it didn't move, the louder the complaints grew. Finally, a black Escalade shoved its way to the front. It screeched to a stop so hard dust washed over the hood. The driver's door flew open, and Marcus Draycott climbed out red-faced, sweating, dressed like a man selling a dream he didn't own. His developer's smile had died weeks ago, replaced with something uglier and far more honest. Behind him stepped HOA President Evelyn Mallory, dressed in a white outfit expensive enough to insult the dirt it touched. She barreled toward the gate, like it had offended her personally, gripping the bars with manicured fingers and shaking them violently. The metal clanged against her wedding ring diamonds. "Open the gate!" she shrieked, voice cracking with hysteria already creeping into her tone. "Do you hear me? Open it now!" I didn't move yet. I let the crowd gather. I let confusion boil into panic. I let frustration turn into anger. Investors were pacing. Buyers were arguing with each other. A news van rolled up with perfect timing. Camera operator already filming. This wasn't sabotage. This was choreography. When the noise reached a fever pitch, I began walking down the road. Slow, controlled, dominant. Conversation stopped as I approached. Dust stirred around my boots. The sun cast my shadow long across the gravel, stretching toward the crowd like a warning. Mallory spotted me first. Her expression snapped into wild fury. "You!" she screamed, jabbing a finger like she was trying to stab the air itself. "You open this gate or I swear I'll have the sheriff down here in 5 minutes charging you with kidnapping. You are illegally detaining 50 homeowners." I leaned casually on the steel post, meeting her rage with the same calm I had the day she first stepped onto my land with her clipboard and entitlement. "No one's detained," I said. "They're free to leave." Someone in the crowd shouted, We can't get to our properties. Another yelled, We paid for access. Someone else, sounding more frantic, What's going on? Why is the road blocked? Mallory puffed up like a cornered turkey. This hillbilly is playing games, she hissed, spittle flying. This road is for Summit Ridge. It always has been. He is unlawfully blocking an HOA-owned entry corridor. I blinked slowly. That so? Draycott stormed forward, sweat soaking through his silk shirt. Stop being ridiculous, Owens. Your road is the only way to our development. You can't just lock it because you're having a tantrum. I let a moment of silence hang. Cameras pointed at me. Dozens of people held up phones. A perfect audience. Exactly what I wanted. I unrolled the giant laminated map I'd brought and held it up. The wind fluttered the corners. The morning sun lit the bold colors perfectly. Red marking my property. Blue marking theirs. This, I said, voice carrying clean and sharp across the crowd, is the original county survey from 1948, certified, recorded, legally binding. The crowd leaned in. Draycott froze. Mallory went pale under her fury. As you can see, I continued, tapping the map, your development sits entirely landlocked. 3 sides bordered by national forest, 1 side bordered by me. I pointed at the road. The red strokes surrounding it might as well have been blood. This road, I said, has been on Owen's land since the day it was carved out by hand. No easement, no right-of-way, no public dedication. You never bought access. You never secured permission. You never even checked. The murmurs turned into shouts. Is this true? Did they know? What do you mean we bought land with no access? A woman in a designer coat started crying. A man with a Rolex demanded answers. Investors turned on each other. On Mallory, on Draycott. Mallory slammed her palms against the gate, rattling it like a caged animal. You set us up! She shrieked. You let us build! You watched us develop millions in property and said nothing! I lifted my eyebrows. Not my job to manage your incompetence. This is fraud, she screamed. No, I corrected. Fraud requires intent. And the only ones who lied to these people, I swept my hand towards the crowd, are standing on your side of the gate. A wave of shock rolled through the buyers. People began shouting at Mallory and Draycott, demanding their contracts, demanding refunds, demanding explanation. Draycott looked like a man standing on a trap door he knew was about to open beneath him. What about the lawsuit? He stammered loudly to me. The easement by necessity? I shrugged. Judge already dismissed it with prejudice. Your surveyor's sworn affidavit destroyed your argument. And that email you wrote threatening to bury me until I gave you access? I let the pause linger. The judge read it twice. Mallory's face collapsed inward. You can't do this. Already did. A news reporter stepped forward. Sir, are you saying these homeowners cannot legally reach their properties? That's exactly what I'm saying. And what happens to the development now? I looked straight at the reporter, then at the crowd, then at the 2 tyrants whose arrogance had carried them here. Whatever happens, I said, doesn't involve my land anymore. Draycott lunged toward the gate as if he could tear it off with bare hands. He shook it violently, screaming that he'd sue everyone, that he'd go to the media, that he'd find a way through. But the steel didn't move. Not an inch. The crowd watched him unravel. The news camera zoomed in. His tantrum was going national. Mallory tried to speak again, but her voice broke into a cracked, strangled sound. Her perfect white outfit was streaked with dust. Her composure was gone. Her authority evaporated. 50 furious buyers closed in on her like wolves smelling blood. You lied to us! We're suing you! We put our life savings into this. My wife quit her job to move in here. Mallory stumbled back, trembling, choking on her own panic. For the first time, She understood the scale of what she'd done. For the first time, she looked like prey. I didn't have to humiliate them. They were doing it themselves. All I did was provide the truth. The mob pushed them back toward the ridge, not physically, but socially, shouting, surrounding, recording, devouring them with outrage. Their attempt at dominance had become their public execution. As they retreated, defeated, overwhelmed by the very people they were supposed to impress, I turned away from the gate. Julie stood at the porch far behind me, phone in hand, recording everything. Her eyes met mine. Steady, proud, certain. I started walking back to her, leaving the chaos behind. The crowd kept shouting. Mallory kept screaming. Draycott kept crumbling. But none of it mattered anymore. Their collapse was complete. Their reputations were dead. Their project was ruined. Their empire was ash. The gate clanged behind me in the breeze, unmoving, unbreakable, unchallengeable, just like the deed that backed it. And as I stepped onto my porch, the last thing I heard from the ridge was a helpless, plaintive wail from Mallory. "You can't do this to us!" I didn't respond. I didn't have to. The land already had. After the public collapse, after the ridge echoed with the sound of 50 angry buyers demanding blood, after Evelyn Mallory and Grant Draycott fled up the mountain with their authority shattered like cheap glass, the valley returned to a quiet so sharp it felt surgical. Julie and I sat on the porch that evening, the golden light stretching long across the pasture. Her hand rested over mine, steady and warm. Boone slept at our feet, finally at peace after months of trespassing violations, fake inspections, drones buzzing overhead, and HOA parasites circling our land like vultures. The battle wasn't over yet, but the tone had changed. This was no longer about defense. This was the counteroffensive, clean, precise, every move backed by law and truth. Their collapse wasn't an accident. It was engineered. And now it was time to finish the job. That night, I laid every document out on the table again. The deeds, the maps, the surveyor's affidavit, the binder of harassment letters, the videos of the fake inspectors Mallory sent to intimidate us, the footage of Draycott assaulting me at the gate, followed by him lying about it to the sheriff. It was a mountain of evidence. Not loud, not dramatic. Quiet power. Lawful force. A war fought not with fists, but with facts that cut deeper. Julie watched me sort through everything. "You're building something," she said softly. "Not a case," I replied. "A reckoning." Frank, our lawyer, didn't even pretend to hide his excitement when I showed up the next morning. His office looked like a paper factory had been hit by a tornado, but he cleared a space for the folders and maps like he was setting down a feast. "Luke," he said, tapping the surveyor's affidavit with one finger, "this is a nuclear weapon in legal form, and this—" He lifted the printed email of Draycott, bragging about burying me with lawsuits until I gave up my land, "is the crater it leaves behind." Frank wasn't the kind of lawyer who bluffed. He preferred certainty over threats. And we had certainty in every direction. He drafted the counterclaim with the kind of meticulous fury only a man with decades of righteous grudges could produce. Harassment, trespassing, fraudulent misrepresentation, attempted coercion of property rights, filing false reports with law enforcement, engaging fake inspectors, and, the cherry on top, intentional interference with livelihood. He built the counterclaim like a brick wall and filed it like a spear. Once it hit the courthouse, everything changed. The county stopped pretending neutrality. The buyers turned on the HOA board with fangs. Investors pulled out. Contractors walked off the ridge. Rumors flew through town like wildfire. Mallory had gone into hiding. Draycott hadn't been seen in 2 days. And Summit Ridge Estates was circling a financial drain with the speed of a flushed toilet. And still, The gate stood closed. The Owens cutoff remained locked. No access, no compromise, no negotiations, not an inch. But the real retaliation wasn't legal filings or public humiliation. It was patience. That long, controlled discipline I learned in the service. The kind of patience that unravels enemies from the inside out. Because while their world was disintegrating, I was consolidating. I hired a licensed surveyor of my own, not just to confirm the property lines, but to place permanent steel markers along the border, every 50 feet. Bright orange caps hammered into the soil like a line of warning flares. Not 1 inch of confusion, not one foothold for fake authority. I installed 5 more cameras along the road, hidden in trees, each angle catching every vehicle that approached the gate. Not for show, for documentation, evidence, truth. Every minute recorded, every trespass captured. HOA tactics only work when their targets are scared or sloppy. I was neither. And they knew it. Because next came the letters. Not theirs. Mine. Certified. Signature required. Delivered straight to the HOA headquarters and Draycott's development firm. Each letter outlined, in precise legal language, every violation they had committed. Every trespass. Every intimidation attempt. Every fraudulent claim. Every unlawful threat. And each letter ended with the same closing line. Any further attempt to access my property or forcibly obtain right-of-way will result in immediate criminal referral and civil action. No emotion, no threats, just consequences. Cold and clean. A week passed, then another. The ridge grew silent. Machinery stopped. No more saws. No more drilling. No more blasting dynamite into the mountain like they owned it. The sound of their arrogance disappeared. And in the quiet, nature began reclaiming the edges of their construction site. Weeds curled through cracks in their pavement. Birds returned to the cedars they had driven off. Boone slept easier. And for the first time in months, Julie and I breathed without tension. But the retaliation wasn't complete until the power structure collapsed completely. That moment arrived when Summit Ridge Estates officially defaulted. Their financing dissolved. Their legal fees drained the last of their liquidity. Their buyers filed lawsuits against them. And the bank, desperate to salvage anything, prepared to foreclose. The foreclosed property, the one with 50 luxury cabins, the one with mountain views, the one worth millions on paper. But with a fatal flaw, no one could reach it. Not legally, not physically, not without me. The bank announced an auction date. Frank smiled when he told me. Luke, they're about to learn the lesson every bully learns eventually. What's that? I asked. A man defending his own land has more leverage than 100 men pretending they own something. On the morning of the auction, I drove into town in my old truck, Boone riding shotgun. Frank met me on the courthouse steps, his suit wrinkled, his smile sharp. The auctioneer looked nervous, sweaty hands, trembling voice, because he knew what was coming. Everyone in town did. When the bidding opened at $5 million, the silence was so complete you could hear the courthouse flagpole clicking in the wind. $3 million. Silence. $1 million. Silence. Then the inevitable. 100,000, I said. Calm, steady, final. The auctioneer practically collapsed with relief. Sold. Just like that. 50 cabins. A luxury development. A ridge worth a fortune. Bought for pennies because of one road, my land, my authority. The retaliation was complete, clean, total, lawful. And when I walked out of town, the deed in my hand, Boone trotting beside me, I felt no triumph, no gloating, just a quiet, resolute satisfaction. They had tried to trespass, threaten, intimidate, and dominate. They had behaved like a power-drunk HOA cult, convinced they could bury anyone who stood in their way. But in the end, They buried themselves. And the land they tried to steal? It was now mine in ways they never imagined. The only thing left was the ending, the cold one they earned. The ridge was quiet on the evening we claimed it. Not the uneasy quiet of tension or threat, but the kind that settles over land when the storm finally ends. The brand new cabins, 50 of them, each built with money and arrogance, sat empty against the fading light, lined up like monuments to the HOA cult that thought they could muscle a rancher off his own land. Their windows reflected the sunset in long, red-gold streaks, but not a single one held life, laughter, or a future. They were shells, expensive shells. And now every single one of them belonged to me. Julie stood beside me at the edge of the ridge, arms crossed softly, the wind pulling at her hair. For months, she had lived through their intimidation attempts, their trespassing violations, their fake inspectors, their drone stalking, their noise, their arrogance, and their threats of eminent domain. She had watched me hold the line with calm precision, watched me play the long game, watched me turn their own greed into the trap they couldn't climb out of. And now she stood on a ridge that was ours, not by chance, not by luck, but by strategy and law. Boone sniffed the rocky ground beside us, tail wagging as if he understood this place had been reclaimed, restored, purified of every fake authority that tried to invade it. "What do we do now?" Julie asked quietly. Not fearfully, curiously, slowly, intentionally. I looked out over the cabins, over the paved paths and manicured lots, over the tripwires of ambition that Mallory and Draycott had woven into a noose for themselves. In the distance, the gate on the Owens cutoff gleamed under the sinking sun, locked, unbroken, immovable. Their attempts to breach it had ended with lawsuits. Their attempts to intimidate me had ended with police reports. Their attempts to manipulate the county had ended with a judge dismantling their lies piece by piece. And their attempts to force their way onto my land had ended with silence, cold, crushing silence. There was a poetic weight to all of it. They wanted to rename my road. They wanted to pave it over. They wanted to build a gatehouse on it with armed HOA enforcers. They wanted to erase my family's history and replace it with profits. And now, they couldn't cross that road even if they begged on their knees. Not legally, not physically, not ever. "We start something new," I said finally. Julie looked up at me, the corners of her mouth already lifting into a smile. "New community?" she teased. I nodded. "Exclusive community? Strict rules?" She laughed. "The strictest." "And the residents?" I knelt and scratched Boone behind the ears. "4 legs only." She let out a soft laugh, the kind that only comes when fear has been replaced by freedom, when the world feels right again, when justice finally settles into your bones like warmth. The sky shifted from gold to deep blue as dusk rose from the pines below. The cabins glowed faintly in the growing dark, unused luxury reduced to quiet silhouettes. It was a kingdom without a king, a development without a developer. An empire collapsed onto itself. And in that stillness, I felt the finality of everything. Mallory, hiding from reporters. Grant Draycott, facing fraud charges and civil suits from angry buyers who had been promised a dream and delivered a cage. The HOA board dissolved under public outrage and legal consequences. Every authority they had pretended to wield had been stripped away. Every threat they'd made was turned back on them. Every trespass had been recorded, documented, and repaid through lawful force. They fought with intimidation. I fought with patience. They fought with entitlement. I fought with proof. They fought with ego. I fought with strategy, and in the end, the land decided who it belonged to. Quietly, permanently, irrevocably. I walked through the first row of cabins as the light dimmed. Their interiors smelled unused, fresh paint, clean lumber, dustless floors. They were beautiful, impressive even. But they were empty because the people who built them forgot the first rule of land. You cannot build a kingdom on ground you do not own. I opened the door to the model home, stepped inside, and turned on the lights. Soft, warm bulbs blinked on across the kitchen, living room, and hallway. Julie leaned against the doorframe, watching me walk the floors like a man taking inventory of a victory he earned yard by yard. "Feels strange," she whispered, "having all of this." I shook my head. "Feels right." "And what happens to them?" she asked, meaning Mallory, Draycott, the HOA cult that fed on intimidation and trespassing violations. "What happens now?" I paused. Then I answered with the truth. "Nothing happens," I said. "It's already done." Because the victory wasn't dramatic, it wasn't loud, it wasn't violent, it was cold, it was final, it was absolute. They weren't coming back, they weren't rebuilding, they weren't retaliating. Their power trip ended exactly where it always ends, with reality. I stepped back out onto the porch of the model home, watching the ridge fade under the night sky. Stars began to appear one by one, each one sharp and clear. The kind of sky people move to the mountains to see. The kind of sky the HOA board bragged about in their brochures. And the kind of sky they'd never enjoy from these cabins, because they no longer belonged here. But I did. My family did. Boone did. Julie wrapped her arm around mine. "Come on," she whispered. "Let's go home." I looked out at the 50 empty cabins one last time. Symbols of greed, symbols of arrogance, symbols of what happens when you underestimate a man who knows every inch of his own land and refuses to bow to trespassers dressed like kings. The wind rustled the pines. The night deepened. The ridge settled. And as we walked back toward the truck, boots crunching softly on the gravel, a final truth echoed through the valley like a verdict. HOA went dead silent.